Welcome back to U.S. Mint Mysteries, where the smallest pieces of metal can hide the biggest fortunes. Today, we're diving into the world of rare half pennies, coins that many people overlook but could be worth more than a brand new luxury, car, or even a house. Some of these tiny treasures have fetched jaw-dropping prices at auction, and the stories behind them are just as fascinating as their values. So get comfortable, because by the end of this video, you might be rushing to check your old coin jars. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another hidden fortune hiding in plain sight. First up, we have the 1948 UK halfpenny. And at first glance, this coin might seem like just another relic from the post-war years. But when you really take a closer look, it's a snapshot of a changing world. Struck in bronze, the obverse carries the unmistakable profile of King George VI with that dignified, steady gaze. On the reverse, the iconic image of the Golden Hind, Sir Francis Drake's famous ship, sails proudly as a reminder of Britain's seafaring history. This was a time when every coin in your pocket had a story, and the halfpenny was still a common part of everyday life. Now, the coin we're talking about here has seen its share of hands. It's circulated, and you can tell by the softened edges, the slightly worn detail in the ship's rigging, and that gentle dark patina that only decades of real use can create. In the coin collecting world, circulated doesn't always mean worthless. For older coins like this, even a worn example can carry serious value, especially when the mintage numbers were lower than other years and when collectors are hunting for specific dates to complete their sets. The 1948 halfpenny isn't the rarest date on paper, but here's where the shock factor comes in. Condition and demand drive the price up more than most people expect. A well-worn average circulated example might go for just $5 to $15, which still surprises people given its age. But step into the realm of higher-grade circulated coins, those that still have sharp details in the ship and the king's hairline, and you're suddenly looking at $50 to $150. That's already a leap for a coin many would toss into a junk box without a second thought. But it gets crazier. If you find a 1948 halfpenny in uncirculated condition, with full mint luster and crisp, untouched details, the value can shoot up past $500. And for rare proof strikes, the kind that were never meant for circulation and were made with extra care for collectors, prices can climb to $2,000 or more. That's for a coin smaller than most bottle caps. And then there's the wild card: errors, misstrikes, off-center designs, double dies. Any of these could transform this humble halfpenny into a four-figure payday. One documented example: with a misaligned obverse sold for over $4,800 at auction simply because of its rarity and pristine condition despite the error. Imagine pulling that from a dusty tin in your attic. What makes coins like the 1948 halfpenny valuable isn't just their age. It's the story they tell, the small mintage variations, and the collectors willing to pay top dollar for the right example. If you have one, take a closer look. Check the detail in the ship's sails, the sharpness of the king's profile, and keep an eye out for anything unusual in the lettering. That little difference could be the key to turning a coin that's been sitting untouched for decades into something worth thousands. Next up, the 1943 UK halfpenny, a coin that holds a special place in history, minted in the middle of World War II, when every piece of metal was precious and the world was on edge. At first glance, it carries that same familiar bronze look, with the proud Golden Hind sailing across the reverse, but there's an unspoken weight to coins from wartime years. Every one of them passed through the hands of people living under rationing, uncertainty, and change. On the obverse, we see King George VI again with that calm, resolute expression. But for collectors, the 1943 issue stands out because it was struck in a year when Britain was diverting resources toward the war effort. While millions were made, a surprising number never survived in good shape. The example we're talking about today is a circulated coin. You can see the softened rigging lines on the ship, the slight smoothing of the king's facial details, and that darker tone from years of use. This is a coin that's been through life, carrying the marks of countless pockets and hands. Now here's where things start to get interesting. A basic, well-worn 1943 half-penny might sell for $3 to $10. Nothing to stop your heart. But in better circulated grades, with sharp detail still visible and minimal surface marks, values rise quickly into the $50 to $120 range. That's a healthy return for a coin most people wouldn't even notice at a flea market. Move up to uncirculated territory, and the story changes dramatically. Brilliant, lustrous examples from 1943 can fetch $400 to $800, depending on how flawless they are. And while that's already exciting, there's a side of this coin that most people have never heard about: the rare wartime errors. During this period, the mints were working at full speed, and mistakes slipped through. A 1943 half-penny with a double-die obverse, where the king's lettering appears faintly doubled, once sold for nearly $5,500. Another with an off-center strike, where part of the design is missing entirely, hit over $7,000 at auction. What makes these wartime coins so collectible isn't just their design or metal. It's the human story they carry. Every scratch and mark is part of a journey that began in the middle of one of the most turbulent times in modern history. Collectors aren't just buying a piece of bronze, they're holding a tangible connection to a year when the world was in the balance. So if you've got a 1943 halfpenny tucked away, don't brush it off as just another old coin. Look closer, really closer. The difference between a common $5 piece and a rare five-figure prize could be hiding in a tiny doubling of a letter, a shift in the strike, or simply the fact that it survived these 8 decades in mint-perfect condition. And that's the thrill of the hunt, knowing that one small coin from 1943 could still make headlines today. Next up, the 1962 UK halfpenny. A coin from the very end of an era, minted just a few years before the denomination would disappear from circulation entirely. By the early 1960s, the halfpenny had been in pockets for over 700 years in one form or another, but change was coming fast. Decimalisation was on the horizon, and coins like this were living their final chapter. That makes surviving examples, especially in top condition, a fascinating target for collectors today. On the obverse, Queen Elizabeth II takes center stage, still in the early years of her reign, wearing the laurel crown. Her youthful portrait, designed by Mary Gillick, has a softer, almost idealized look compared to the later, more formal portraits. On the reverse, the Golden Hind remains, that proud symbol of exploration and naval heritage that had graced the halfpenny for decades. But by 1962, minting technology had improved, and the finer rigging lines and details were sharper than ever, at least when the coin was new. The example we're looking at now has clearly seen circulation. The ship's sails have lost some of their fine detail. The Queen's hair is slightly worn smooth in places, and the edges have that rounded feel that comes from years of pocket travel. In this condition, the value might be modest, usually between $1 and $5. But here's the part that shocks people, because it's one of the last years before design and denomination changes. Demand for pristine examples is much higher than you'd expect. Find a 1962 halfpenny in near-perfect uncirculated condition with its full original mint shine, and you could be looking at $50 to $150. And if you manage to get your hands on a proof strike, the kind made for collectors with mirror-like fields and frosted detail, the price can jump to $500 or more. Then there are the elusive errors. The 1962 halfpenny has been reported with a few dramatic minting mistakes, like double die reverses where the ship's lettering shows a ghostly duplication, or off-metal strikes where the coin was accidentally struck on the wrong planchet. One such off-metal example sold for over $4,200 because of its rarity and unusual appearance. Another, struck slightly off-center so that part of the Queen's portrait is missing, drew fierce bidding and went for nearly $3,800. It's this mix of being a last chapter coin tied to a major shift in British currency that keeps collectors interested. There's an emotional pull to owning a perfect 1962 halfpenny. It's holding on to a moment right before the old ways vanished forever. And that's why some collectors will pay far more than you'd expect for one that looks like it just left the mint yesterday. Next up, the 1947 UK halfpenny, a coin that quietly carries the weight of post-war Britain in its coppery surface. Just 2 years after the end of World War II, the country was still rationing food, rebuilding cities, and trying to find its footing in a changed world. Coins like this were more than just currency. They were the small, everyday tools that kept life moving in a time of recovery. The obverse features the familiar portrait of King George VI, his profile dignified and steady, symbolizing stability in uncertain times. On the reverse, the Golden Hind once again sails across the bronze surface, but by 1947, these coins were being minted in a Britain very different from the one that had produced them in the pre-war years. Metal supplies were still tight, and minting quality sometimes varied, meaning that pristine survivors are much harder to find than you might think. The circulated 1947 halfpenny in front of us has clearly lived a full life. Its rigging lines are softened. The king's hair detail is smooth, and there's that darker, almost chocolate-brown patina that only decades of handling can create. In this condition, its market value may be around $3 to $8, enough to catch a beginner collector's eye. But as always, the real surprises come when you climb up the grading scale. Higher-grade circulated examples with sharp ship details and minimal surface marks can easily fetch $40 to $120. And in fully uncirculated, mint-bright condition, the WWII value jumps sharply. You could be looking at $400 or more, especially if the coin has been certified by a top grading service. Proof issues from this year, which were never meant for circulation and were struck with extra care, are even scarcer and can reach $1,500 at auction. But what really gets collectors excited about the 1947 halfpenny are the rare errors. Wartime and post-war years were notorious for minting slip-ups. One known example features a dramatic off-center strike that left part of the design cut off, selling for over $6,000. Another with a double-die obverse, where the king's profile and lettering show a faint duplication, brought in nearly $5,200. Why the interest? Because coins like this are tangible survivors of a moment in history, and the fewer pristine ones that remain, the more collectors are willing to pay. Every scratch, every faded detail is part of its journey through a Britain that was rebuilding itself from the ground up. If you've got a 1947 halfpenny tucked away somewhere, don't assume it's just a worthless old bronze disc. A closer inspection under a magnifying glass might reveal details that push it into the high hundreds or even the thousands, proof that even the smallest coin can carry a staggering price tag if it has the right story, condition, or rare flaw. Next up, the 1941 UK halfpenny. A small bronze coin minted in the heart of World War II, when Britain was under constant threat and every factory was working at full capacity to support the war effort. Coins from this year aren't just metal. They're artifacts from a time when the world's future was uncertain, and even the smallest change in your pocket had a story. The obverse bears the portrait of King George VI, with that composed and steady look, a symbol of leadership during the darkest years of the war. On the reverse, the Golden Hind still sails across the waves, its masts and rigging telling the tale of Britain's proud naval history. But in 1941, bronze for coinage was a luxury, and minting quality wasn't always perfect. Many coins came out with slight variations or minor imperfections that today's collectors find irresistible. The circulated example in front of us shows the kind of wear you'd expect from 8 decades of life. The fine lines in the sails are smooth, the king's hair detail is faint, and the color has deepened into a rich brown patina. In this condition, it might bring in $4 to $10, but as always, that's just the starting point. Move into better preserved circulated examples, and you can see values climbing into the $40 to $100 range. That's for coins where the details are still crisp and the surfaces show only light handling marks. In full, uncirculated condition, the 1941 half-penny can command $350 to $600, especially if it retains full original luster. Proof issues, far rarer, can hit $1,800 or more. Then come the real jaw-droppers, the errors. Wartime production meant the mints were under pressure and mistakes slipped through. There are 1941 half-pennies with dramatic double-die reverses, where the ship's name and lettering appear slightly doubled, one of those sold for nearly $5,900. Even rarer are off-metal strikes, where the coin was accidentally minted on a planchet meant for another denomination. One such oddity brought over $8,000 when it hit the auction block. It's this mix of wartime context, limited survival in high grades, and the occasional spectacular mint error that makes the 1941 half-penny such a thrill for collectors. It's not just about owning an old coin, it's about holding a piece of history that survived blackouts, air raids, and ration books. So if you happen to spot a 1941 half-penny in a box of old coins, give it a closer look. That tiny disc of bronze might not only tell the story of Britain's endurance in wartime, it might also tell the story of your next big collector's payday. Next up, the 1967 UK halfpenny, a coin that marks the very last chapter of this denomination's long history. By the time this one was minted, the halfpenny was already on its way out, with decimalisation just a few years away. Millions of them were struck in 1967, but most were quickly tucked away in jars, drawers, or simply discarded when they became obsolete. Today, finding one in average shape is easy, but finding one in pristine, untouched condition is where the real excitement begins. The obverse features the youthful portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, her profile still in that graceful Mary Gillick, design used during the early decades of her reign. The reverse keeps the familiar golden hind sailing across the waves, its details as sharp as ever on coins that escaped circulation. But the example we're talking about here has been well used. The ship's rigging is faint, the Queen's hair detail is worn smooth, and the edges have softened after years of handling. In this circulated condition, a 1967 halfpenny might fetch $1 to $3 at best. Now here's where the surprise comes in. Because it's the final year of issue, uncirculated examples have become a target for collectors who want a last-year coin in perfect condition. In brilliant mint state with full luster, these can bring $50 to $150, far more than people expect for something so common in worn grades. Proof strikes, made for collectors in very limited numbers, can hit $400 or more. And yes, even for a final-year coin, there are jaw-dropping error varieties. Double-die obverse strikes, where the Queen's portrait or lettering has a faint doubling, have sold for over $2,500. An even rarer off-metal strike from this year, believed to be minted on a foreign coin blank, stunned collectors when it sold, for more than $6,800. It's a reminder that even in the 1960s, the mint wasn't immune to the occasional mistake that could turn an ordinary coin into a collector's treasure. The 1967 halfpenny may not have the wartime romance of the earlier George VI issues, but it has something equally powerful, the sense of finality. This was the end of an unbroken line stretching back centuries. For collectors, owning one in perfect shape is like holding the closing page of a very long story. So if you come across a 1967 halfpenny, especially one that looks like it just rolled off the press, don't dismiss it as pocket change from the past. It might just be a piece of history worth far more than you imagine. Next up, the 1959 UK halfpenny, a coin from the mid-century period when Britain was rebuilding and modernizing after the war, yet still holding tight to its traditional designs. By this time, the halfpenny was a familiar sight in daily life, but subtle changes in minting quality and the arrival of Queen Elizabeth II's portrait in 1953 had given the denomination a fresh face for a new era. On the obverse, we see the young Queen Elizabeth II in that elegant Mary Gillick portrait, crowned with a laurel wreath instead of a crown, a design meant to project youth and grace rather than royal formality. The reverse still features the golden hind, with its finely engraved sails and rigging, a lasting nod to England's age of exploration. But the 1959 issue, while common in worn grades, can turn into a genuine collector's prize in the right condition. The circulated example we have here shows what decades of handling can do. The ship's fine lines are smoothed away, the Queen's hair is flattened in detail, and the edges have a slight rounding from pocket wear. In this grade, it might only fetch $1 to $4. But if you step up into lightly circulated or near-mint examples, where most of the original detail is still crisp, values jump to $40 to $90. The real magic, however, happens in uncirculated condition. A 1959 halfpenny with its full original luster, sharp strikes, and zero handling marks can sell for $200 to $450, especially when slabbed and graded by a respected service. Proof versions made in tiny quantities for collectors can reach $800 or more. And of course, there are those rare errors that make the hunt thrilling. One 1959 halfpenny struck slightly off-center, with the Queen's portrait pushed toward the rim, sold for over $3,500. Another, featuring a double die reverse where the ship's lettering appeared doubled, went for nearly $4,200. Even more spectacular was an off-metal strike on a smaller copper-nickel blank, which stunned bidders at auction and brought in over $6,000. Coins, like the 1959 halfpenny, aren't just about metal and mintage numbers. They're about spotting that one example that has survived the decades in extraordinary condition, or finding the rare flaw that turns an everyday coin into a payday. And the best part? These coins still turn up in old boxes, forgotten drawers, and family coin jars, just waiting for someone with a sharp eye to uncover their hidden value. Next up, the 1944 UK halfpenny, a wartime coin minted in the thick of World War II, when Britain's resources were stretched to the limit, and even small coins like this had to be produced with efficiency and speed. Every 1944 halfpenny is a little time capsule from those tense years, carrying the signs of both the country's resilience and the pressure the Royal Mint was under to keep money flowing. The obverse features King George VI with his composed, confident profile, a steady presence during the uncertainty of the war. On the reverse, the Golden Hind still sails proudly, her rigging and masts standing out sharply on coins that managed to survive without much wear. But the one we're looking at here has been through decades of use. The ship's details are softened, the king's hair is smoothed, and the bronze has developed a deep brown patina that collectors recognize as the mark of honest circulation. In well-worn, circulated condition, a 1944 halfpenny might only bring $3 to $8. But move up to lightly circulated examples, where the fine lines in the sails are still visible and the lettering remains sharp, and you're looking at $40 to $100. And in uncirculated condition, with full original mint luster and no handling marks, values can climb to $400 or more. The real thrill comes with the rarer varieties and errors. The Royal Mint was under immense production pressure in 1944, and mistakes happened. Double-die obverse examples, where the lettering around the king's portrait appears doubled, have sold for over $5,700. An off-center strike from this year, leaving part of the ship cut off, stunned bidders when it crossed $7,000 at auction. There are even rumors of a few 1944 half-pennies accidentally struck on foreign planchets, which, if confirmed, could push the value into the five-figure range. Part of what makes the 1944 half-penny so collectible is that it's from the very heart of wartime Britain, a year when the country was still enduring bombings, rationing, and an uncertain future. Owning one in top condition isn't just about rarity. It's about holding a survivor from one of history's most critical moments. So, if you've got a 1944 halfpenny sitting in a tin or tucked into an old album, give it a second look. That tiny disc of bronze could be worth far more than its humble size suggests. And in the right condition, or with the right flaw, it might just be the coin that makes your collection unforgettable. And last up, we circle back to the 1967 UK halfpenny, but this time we're talking about a circulated example, the kind that's lived through countless pockets, purses, and change drawers before the denomination was retired for good. By 1967, the halfpenny's days were numbered. Decimalisation was only a few years away, and the Royal Mint struck millions of these as a final, massive production run before saying farewell to a coin that had been part of Britain's currency for centuries. The obverse shows Queen Elizabeth II in her youthful Mary Gillick portrait, the laurel wreath in her hair symbolizing continuity and grace. The reverse still carries the golden hind, sails billowing, a design that by then had become a beloved classic. But on a heavily circulated 1967 halfpenny, those once crisp lines in the rigging and the Queen's hair have softened noticeably. The bronze has taken on a warm, dark patina, and the edges are smooth from decades of handling. In this worn condition, a 1967 halfpenny might only be worth $1 or $2 to most buyers, but that's just the surface. Collectors still keep an eye out for unusual examples, even among the worn coins. A lightly circulated 1967 can bring $10 to $20, and if it shows a rare minting flaw, the story changes completely. Errors from this year include double die reverses, where the ship's name or lettering appears doubled, sometimes faintly but noticeably under magnification. One such coin, even in circulated condition, sold for over $2,200 because of how sharply the doubling appeared. Off-center strikes from 1967 also exist, with part of the design missing, and those have sold in the $3,000 to $4,500 range, depending on the severity of the misalignment. And then there's the rare off-metal strike. A handful of 1967 halfpennies were accidentally struck on planchets meant for foreign coins, creating an odd silver-gray color instead of the usual bronze. Even in circulated shape, one of these brought more than $6,000 at auction. That's the thing about coins like this. To the untrained eye, it's just a worn, end-of-the-line halfpenny. But to a collector, it's the potential for a hidden error, an odd variation, or just the satisfaction of holding the last breath of a denomination that had been part of Britain's money for centuries. Even the most ordinary-looking example can carry a surprise that turns pocket change into serious collector cash. And that's why the hunt never gets old, because whether it's a gleaming, uncirculated gem or a humble, circulated piece like this one, you never know when a coin will reveal a story and a value far bigger than anyone expects.